Hello and welcome to The Extra Mile. I'm Linda BOUDREAUX. Our guest today is Bob THIBODEAUX. Bob is the owner and founder of Bob's Tree Preservation. He's been with us before and he's one of my favorite people because when you spend time with someone who loves trees and you're spending time with someone who really loves nature and all that's in it. So Bob, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
And it's true that you do love trees. That's correct?
Oh yes,
huh?
very much so.
How did you ever get to be the tree guy?
Well, I was telling someone earlier today that I had a great-grandmother that came here from Canada, very young age, and she gave trees for to her friends and people who had weddings and birthdays and so forth.
So her gift was a tree?
That's what she gave, because she figured that was the only thing that really lasted.
Yeah.
Was a tree. And as she was older, and I didn't know her before, this would have been in the 1940s. And I can remember the little time I got to spend with this wonderful lady. And she was very much French speaking, okay, as we all were. Still are quite a bit. But she said one of the greater joys in her life at her age, I wanted her to live forever.
Yeah.
And I didn't know her all that well. I was very, very young, maybe 6 or 7 years old at that time. And she said a great joy in her life was riding around and looking at the different places and seeing trees that she had donated.
What a wonderful story, Bob.
And one day she told me, she said, you know, trees is she was a devout Catholic. She was so strong Catholic. She said, and you know what? She said, I'll plant these trees, and someday I'm going to see them. I'm going to get a bird's eye view of these trees in my heavenly home. So she said, what else can you do? What other gift can you appreciate so much like a tree? And I think about that a lot of times.
So she can enjoy them when she's here, and when she's in heaven looking down, she can see the tops of the trees.
That's right. She gets to get a bird's eye view of her trees.
And the birds are living in the trees while
That's
they're
right.
at it. So
people enjoying their shade and their fruit and so forth.
You know, I was at an event the other day, and they read the story of the giving tree, you know, which is, you know, that story about the tree that gives its apples and gives its trunk and to make its person happy. And there is that sense of, oddly enough, a shared experience sometimes with the trees. And so that's why I guess we have tree huggers and the like here in this country and all around the world.
That's true.
Now, you do a lot to get trees out there, don't you? I mean, it isn't... There's more than tree preservation. You also are involved in some programs that help us to get trees planted. Am I right about that?
Yes, ma'am. And one of the things that really concerns me is the amount of trees that have died along our coastline, especially just this few days ago. I was in Grand Chenier, Louisiana. And you drive down 82 and you look at these thousands of live oaks that are dead.
What's happening to them, Bob?
Obviously saltwater intrusion, a lot of the... And it's sad that so many have died, and I wonder... I was 16 years old when Hurricane Audrey came through the Prairie and Acadia Parish and Church Point, where I was at that time, and we had 100+ mile-an-hour winds through our little town of Church Point. It was a very damaging storm, and I wonder now, without all these trees, these old, centuries-old live oaks that are dead, what in the world is going to slow down these winds or stop the erosion?
Because the trees are serving a function. They're not just beautiful.
There's a lot of things about the trees along our coastline, and I'm thinking right now of Grand Chenier, Louisiana. I have some very dear friends there, and just some wonderful people that are giving and always want to help, and just some of the most wonderful people in the world. You see all these trees dying, and I don't see replanting. Our Acorns of Hope program, we planted several hundred, probably maybe 3,000 trees there.
You planted in Grand Chenier or where?
Creole, Cameron, from Highway 27, where it intersects with 82 in Creole, coming this direction on 82 and through Grand Chenier.
Okay.
The little community of Grand Chenier. We planted a lot of these trees, and since then, so many of the older trees on the north side of the highway are dead. And I can only see, the only thing I can see is that salt water stayed too long on. The species is very tolerant to salt. But you're losing a lot of things when these trees die. I'm afraid we lose a part of the world is very.
Now,
very
how about
unique.
the trees that you've planted? Are they thriving?
Some are thriving, many of them have also died.
Is that to be expected? Or more dying than you think should?
A lot more died than I think should. I think some bad decisions were made when the saltwater intrusion came in. I saw it, well, not entirely, more than just what I'm going to tell you. The salt water came in, and the species is tolerant to salt.
Came in, wait, when did the salt water
Came
come
in,
in?
the intrusion, salt water
It came in,
from the Gulf and
okay.
the marsh.
It's just coming in. I mean,
Yes,
it's not like a
because
hurricane.
the
It's
storm
coming
just
in.
kind of
Okay.
drove it in.
Okay,
And then a lot of that water was trapped.
okay.
And I hear different stories about that water for many years was able to get out and into the portions of the Mermentau, but it was trapped in these areas. And the species, the age, and just flirted with the salt water too long, just killed the trees.
And we're talking about live oaks here, right?
I'm talking about probably the finest live oaks on the planet. Audubon wrote in his books, the finest live oaks of the world were in that part of the country.
And they're dying.
And they're dying, and it's to me, it bothers me. I remember in 1998, at a high noon August day, my young daughter and myself, and at that time, Governor Mike Foster, rode 7.25 miles in the shade at high noon.
Covered by the trees?
Canopy of these trees. And today, I drove it just a few days ago at high noon, no shade at all. These trees are dead. And we need to figure out some kind of way where we can replant. The industry, in the nursery industry, needs these live oaks for seed because they are truly the best there is in live oaks.
Anywhere.
Anywhere on the planet. And Audubon wrote that in his books, that these were the finest live oaks of the world. And I believe that. And I've been collecting acorns from these trees for many years, planting them on my tree farm here in Church Point.
You're kind of a Johnny Appleseed of the oak tree, aren't you?
Oh, yes. And I planted thousands of them, and I brought them back. They're unfortunate, many of them died. Some of them died after the hurricane because of the soil became compacted. Heavy equipment after the storm to clean up the site. It looks like we do a lot of harm to the land sometimes by compacting the soil with heavy equipment, but I saw a lot of equipment going in there unnecessarily to pick up small branches that should have been picked up by other means, preferably maybe humans walking out
You
there
mean bending
picking
down and picking them up?
traveling with that heavy equipment over that salt-saturated soil, and then compacting the soil, then the salt can't get out. Plus, the compacted soil. We saw a lot of our trees die from that.
And you were saying, and we want to talk today some about hurricanes, what we can do to protect our trees during hurricanes, because hurricane season is coming, and one of the big fears about the storms is our trees coming down, our branches coming down. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. What do we need to do? How can we keep our trees and our homes and our lives safe during a big storm?
Two things come to my mind. Soil quality. soil quality is so important.
Now, how can you tell what your soil quality is?
Well, I like to dig a hole and count earthworms.
Okay.
And of course, I like to take some soils. I like to show my customers. I keep thinking, God didn't make the land complicated. I'm afraid man did that.
Okay.
Because I can remember my grandfather going out in his garden every year with his old bucket, and he'd dig the soil out, and he'd put about 1.5 gallons of soil in his bucket. He'd count earthworms. And if he didn't count 10 earthworms, that was a little old thing like that. And if he didn't count 10 earthworms, he would walk out to the compost pile, which was mostly animal manure.
Mm-hmm.
Today it's kind of a nasty thing, but then it was.
It's what it is.
That's what it enriched the earth, and it still does, by the way.
It still does, yes.
I think we forgot about that. And he'd add that to his vegetable garden, and that was his fertilizer. Let me tell you what, he fed a large family during the Great Depression off of that small acreage.
And he was able to get his worm count up too, wasn't he?
That's right. He knew what the earthworm was all about. And I still think about that. And I've tried and I've compared that with lab tests, sending soil samples to the lab. And if you watch it, it works. It's pretty good.
So earthworms are one real key to
10 earthworms per square foot of soil. Usually it's going to be you can plant your crop.
Okay. And you can save your tree.
You can save your tree. We need to do that, especially in the urban soil, because we're in the deep south. We need these big trees to slow down winds, mm-hmm. but also to give us shade.
I'm thinking shade is a good thing.
Just talk about we need that shade to keep these air conditioners from running.
That's right.
And
just the sheer beauty of them.
Plus the aesthetic value, the sheer beauty. But that tree needs a good quality soil. Unfortunately, in my lifetime, I see soil declining. We are not working with nature. We're overly dependent on synthetic compounds to condition the soil, and they just don't work.
So what do we need to do?
Well, we have to do like the old people did.
Go get some cow manure.
You keep your cow manure, but when a log rots, when a tree falls or branch falls, those carbons need to stay on the line. But if you watch what we do, it's picked up and it's brought somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So that soil has to decline. And you're not going to fix that soil with synthetic fertilizers or all these chemicals. In fact, we're finding out that that's a big problem we have with our fire ants, is that as the soil declines, then you're creating ideal conditions for those invasive, a lot of invasive species and plants, but that terrible fire ant.
They like bad soil or declining soil.
That's right, because the soil microbes usually help keep the fire ants under control.
How interesting.
One of the things we can tell on a site where people are using a lot of pesticides, you're going to see a lot of fire ant mounds.
So pesticides actually can backfire on you then? Yes,
we're overusing them, but we should be keeping our organic matter, everything that's biodegradable, on a site. And cheers for our wonderful city of Lafayette, Louisiana, that recycles so much. This is wonderful.
Composting, yeah.
It's worse in a lot of other places. Thank goodness we do that here. I wish we would keep it more on the land than we did. If I cut a tree, I try to encourage my customer to some way, shape, or form get those carbons back onto your land. And usually grinding it is the idea.
I was going to say, how do you do that? So grind.
We take them and we bring them to our facility, and we don't waste none of that stuff, because that's probably the best soil conditioner is the native vegetation.
Makes sense.
If we can bring it back.
It makes sense.
It seems like it has to leave. Nobody wants a big log in their front yard.
Yeah,
but when that thing goes somewhere, it should come back in a different form. And I'll call it eco mulch.
Yeah.
Bring it back, and then you're going to keep maintain your soil quality. Because we figure that, and a lot of people in the industry don't agree with me, but I'm getting kind of hard-headed about some things.
Things you really believe.
I am convinced that 80% of our tree failures in the recent storms was preventable.
Preventable?
Preventable. Mostly because of poor maintenance. We're not maintaining our soil.
See,
like
I
we
always
should.
thought that it was to trim the trees and keep our trees healthy from the top, but that's not true.
Well, it is true to some extent. We seem to not want to maintain trees for whatever reason, or maybe our industry doesn't do a good enough job of informing people that, hey, that tree needs to be maintained. It'll get 60, 70, 100 feet tall. If it's not maintained, it's coming down. And chances are when it does, it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
If it's well maintained, first of all, maintain a good quality soil. You have to take care of that soil.
And how do you take care? I mean, assuming that, let's say that you don't have branches, or let's say, I mean, it's just not a lot. The tree's there, it's growing. There's not a lot going on. The leaves fall off every year, but that's about it. Just put the leaves back in the soil.
The leaves should stay.
Okay.
The leaves should not be put in a bag and put at the end of the road, because Bob Thibodeaux coming down the road. I want to pick them up.
Okay.
And I'm going to reuse them. I know that leaf is very, very precious, very, very valuable. Naturally, I prefer people would keep their biodegradables and reuse them. Keep that soil condition where these tree roots will go into that soil. If you got 10 earthworms per square foot of soil, you're going to have a lot of tree roots. And when those strong hurricane winds come, that tree is going to sway and it'll stand.
And that's what you want.
That's what we want. We have to have good soil. Now, after good soil, then proper pruning, like you're talking about. Proper pruning is so very important. And unfortunately, a lot of times our trees are overly pruned.
Okay.
They're either overly pruned or not pruned enough. But the healthier your soil is, the less pruning you're going to need.
Because your tree is solid.
That's right.
Okay, I got it.
Less limbs are going to die with a healthy soil.
Okay.
And the tree's going to be much prettier.
And I guess that's another thing that you can kind of judge the health of your tree is if your limbs are healthy.
That's right.
So, just look at your tree.
That's right.
If your tree looks good, then it's probably doing okay.
If it's healthy, it'll sway in that wind like this and it won't break. But if it's not healthy, if it doesn't have a healthy soil, it'll sway a little bit and it'll break. And sometimes it'll break without even any winds at all.
And then you've got a big surprise on your hands.
That's right. It's cheaper to properly maintain the trees.
And I don't know that people really understand that or understand how to do it even. We have a lot of tree companies in town, a lot of them come and trim your trees for you, but I don't know that people are really educated. Certainly they haven't educated me on proper tree care.
I think our industry needs to do a better job of informing people. We grew up in a time, and I guess the Great Depression, the people depended on that healthy soil because that's how they fed the family.
Yeah.
Now it's like, I find that they're not as connected. It's maybe not as important. They don't think about it. But then people in my profession, it's easier to sell a synthetic product,
But you're not a big believer in this.
No, not I. Not I. I find it easier to take care of my trees. What concerns me is after a storm, I don't want my customers calling me that a tree's on their house. Usually it means I didn't do a very good job.
So your job is to keep that tree off of my
My
house
job
and
is
stand
to keep it, that's right. And we help other tree companies as well. If they need help, we try to spread the word because anytime man takes care of the land, we all do better.
It's true.
And we live in a wonderful part of the world. I mean, this Lafayette, Louisiana, this Acadia, look at this time we're eating all this good food.
I mean, look at us.
Crawfish, and all that comes from the land.
That's true. That's true.
So we need to take care of the soil better than we do. And we need to help other people learn how to take care of the land. Because, we're going to leave that to the future generations, the people that come behind us. And I think that's what God wants of us.
That's what we got to stand on. That's what we got to live off of. I mean, there's no way around it. But you were saying before we started that you talked about it during today's show, but your real concern as an urban arborist is the soil condition. That's
our biggest concern at BBQ Preservation Company is is to condition the soil. And we have not figured out a better way to do it than to encourage our customers to keep their biodegradables.
Sure does sound simple, Bob.
It's very, very simple.
Yeah.
It's a simple thing. Whatever comes up out of the ground that's living, it needs to go back into that line.
So when you clip it, leave it.
That's when you clip it, leave it. When a hurricane comes, I guess this is the worst thing that happens, is when a hurricane comes, everything seems to be cut.
Yeah.
A lot of it because it was poorly maintained. I figure 80% of it was not properly maintained. Then it's cut and then it's moved somewhere else, where in most cases it doesn't need to be over.
Right, it needs to be back
In
there.
my case, it comes to my mulch yard, where I'm processing it and making it available back to that community.
So I can get mulch from you?
Yes,
I didn't know that.
we recycle, very big on recycling. Anything that was once alive, we will process it and put it back on the line.
So people in the general public can come out and get some mulch from you. And where do we go to get it? You're in Church Point.
They can call my office, but we have several locations where they could pick it up.
Okay.
But we have a grinding facility here on Riceland Road, 2441 Riceland Road.
Okay. Which is really good to know, because especially it's spring now, so people are kind of getting in their yards and they're starting to think about it. But
And it's also the least expensive mulch, especially if it comes from your yard.
then it's like free.
That's like free. We charge to pick it up and get it out of the way, and then we compost it, we grind it, compost it, and we offer it back to the customer.
That's a nice deal. So if you come and trim my tree, then you can take my limbs, compost it, and I can come and get
If
it.
you can't process, we have the grinding equipment on the site that grinds the majority of it.
Oh,
Except for the big stumps and the big logs, we have to bring it to our facility. Now that stump and that log is loaded with valuable carbons now. The bigger the log, the heavier deposit of carbon that needs to come back on that line.
and it needs to come back on the land that it came from.
That's right. Nature functions that way. Everything that was once alive, try to keep it on your property if you can, and your soil will stabilize. But the moment, what has happened in my lifetime, I've been in the tree business all my life. I've been planting trees and trimming trees and fertilizing trees since 1946 or 47, I guess. But I've noticed over the years, every time we have a hurricane, we got more damaged trees, more trees falling.
Yeah.
And as the soil declines, you can expect that. And now what has happened the last few years, which really concerns me, is that a lot of the fallen trees and limbs during the hurricane, the soil is saturated from the rains and large amounts of rainfall. Here comes the heavy equipment in that wet soil, picking up these branches.
We call it.
Yeah. And then that compacts and aggravates the soil even more. So what's happening is every time we have a hurricane, we got more trees falling, more tree damage. And a lot of our communities are paralyzed by that, and it should not happen. We need to come up with programs where when a hurricane comes, this process, we got to clear the streets, we got to move this material, but some kind of way, it should come back to that site. The community should not allow it to leave the township without some kind of arrangements to have it brought back.
So I think that's probably the other message for today's show, because I know we're getting the signal that we're just about out of time. But so as communities, then we need to be aware, we need to be informed, and create ways that we can get our material back into the community in order to preserve the soil, to preserve the trees, so that we don't have somebody coming down in the first place.
That's right.
Because it's a cycle.
It's a cycle.
It's a cycle. So it's not just that the trees are getting older. It's that the trees are not as healthy.
What we're studying in modern arboriculture is that trees can live much longer than we thought.
Because they can live
Well, we
really
used to
long
tell
time.
people 50 years ago. Now we're finding out that these trees can live much longer. Just take care of that soil. Take care of the soil and prune that tree properly. don't over prune it, and keep enriching that soil.
And do that by putting back in the
That's right.
organics that came
That's
up.
the simplest, easiest way to do it, and the best.
It's not rocket science, is it?
It'd be rocket science, this Cajun boy could not have it.
I think you
I
got
work at almost every major university in the state and some out of state, and I wonder why is this, make people making rocket science out of this when it's so simple?
because you made it too easy. We're out of time. Thank you so much for
Thank
being with us
you.
again
Thank you so
today.
much. I enjoyed every
One
minute.
second while we close, but thank you for being here today.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed it. Thank you for the
And thank
invite.
you for watching The Extra Mile.